This is the S21 Ultra, a 1 lakh rupees flagship smartphone, and this is the Realme Narzo 30A, a sub 10,000 rupees budget smartphone. So today we are going to do a speed test between both of these phones, which are, to be honest, generations ahead to each other, and the results might surprise you. Okay, before proceeding further, these are the glance of specs for your reference. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, these are the series of tests that I'm gonna run on each of these phones. So I'm gonna start off with boot up speeds and then proceed to some series of benchmarking tests. After that, we are gonna move to some real world tests like app opening speeds, RAM capacity, app installation speeds, and website load tests. Okay, now that we have got a pretty good understanding of what we are going to do, let's kick off with boot speeds. First of all, both these mobiles are currently turned off and all the apps were cleared off of memory before shutdown. So, let's turn them back on. Here, the S21 Ultra comes with Snapdragon 888 chipset, which is literally the fastest chipset in the Android world, just under Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. But on the other hand, Realme Narzo 30A is powered by Helio G85, which is again a decent chipset, but not a great one. Okay, the boot up scores are as follows. The S21 Ultra finished in 20.64 seconds, while the Narzo 30A took around 9 seconds more, finishing at 29 seconds. Moving on, the next test is benchmarks. I chose to go with benchmarks as one of my tests because it could possibly measure some things that we cannot, like opening multiple apps at once or rendering a big massive 8K footage. So the apps that are being used are Geekbench 5 to measure CPU performance, PCMark which calculates CPU, GPU and some real world test scenarios, Androbench to measure storage speeds, and finally CPU throttling test to see if the CPU throttles at very intensive loads. So now starting with Geekbench 5, S21 Ultra takes a big leap over Narzo 30A with nearly 3 times higher scores in both single and multi-cores. And moving on to PCMark, which is again an intensive task, Narzo 30A scored 8858 while S21 Ultra touched 12,831, and that's a 50% higher score compared to Narzo. Now progressing on to one of the most important benchmarks, Androbench. I say this important because just like SSDs make your laptop faster compared to hard drives, faster storage in a smartphone makes the phone faster and responsive. Here, S21 Ultra comes with UFS 3.1, whereas Narzo 30A comes with eMMC 5.1. So technically, S21 Ultra should be much faster. So running Androbench, we got pretty interesting but kinda expected results. S21 Ultra is 650% faster compared to Narzo 30A, and that's not a small number. And finally I ran CPU throttling test to see if running such intensive tasks for a while throttle the CPU. But no, both the graphs were mostly linear, which is quite surprising. Okay, with that we have completed the benchmarks. And S21 Ultra is 300% faster in terms of its CPU and 650% faster in terms of its storage speeds. This difference between S21 Ultra and Narzo 30A is so massive. But does all of this translate to real world performance? And is S21 Ultra really that faster compared to Narzo 30A? Let's check. So now we are moving to real world tests. Starting with app load test, we have 10 apps that we are going to use for this test. So kicking things off, just after we started, S21 Ultra is blazing fast as expected. It just does not strain a bit. But what I found interesting is, though the Narzo 30A is a very cheap phone in terms of its pricing, it still is able to give a decent fight with 1 or 2 apps behind. But this difference massively increased just after moving to games. The S21 Ultra crushes in here, but Narzo with its less powerful GPU struggles quite a bit. Finally, the S21 Ultra completes this round in 45 seconds, while Narzo 30A is still at COD. Speeding up things a bit, the Narzo 30A finishes at 1 minute 11 seconds. The final scores are 45 seconds and 1 minute 11 seconds. Okay, considering the massive price gap or spec gap, I still feel Narzo 30A performed exceedingly well. The next test is RAM capacity. Here we are going to open all the apps from previous test which are in RAM to check how many apps does the RAM withholds. And believe me, things get a lot interesting here. Starting with YouTube, Narzo 30A reloads the very first app, and on the other side, S21 Ultra is just crushing with the third app and having everything in memory. Fast forwarding for a second, the final results are like this. S21 Ultra has every single app in memory, while the Narzo 30A doesn't have any app in memory. Okay, to say I was kinda expecting S21 Ultra to perform the way it did, but I thought Narzo 30A would have at least 1 or 2 apps in memory, but that did not happen. The next test is app installation speeds. Here the target is simple. I am gonna install an app from Play Store and see which installs faster. And the app I chose to go with is Asphalt 9. So before clicking install, both these phones are connected to the same Wi-Fi and no background apps are running. So what do you think? It should be S21 Ultra, right? But no, the S21 Ultra finished in 9 minutes 24 seconds, while this time around, the Narzo 30A surpassed Samsung flagship scoring 9 minutes 18 seconds, which is really impressive. I literally am not expecting this. And then on to our final and last test, Webload check. This is just to check the casual browsing experience, and here I don't feel that there is much of a difference between both of these phones. Yes, Samsung is faster and better, but the difference is too less to make out, and a normal user would never notice stuff like this. Finally, to conclude things off, S21 Ultra is a great performer, period. There is no doubt about it. But the budget competitor Realme Narzo 30A is also decent. Actually no, it's surprisingly good. I was not expecting this performance from a phone that literally costs 90% lesser than its competition. And to answer the question we initially had, no. Just because benchmarks show lesser score doesn't mean the phone performs bad. And we have the example right here. The Realme phone actually did better than what benchmarks had to say. So people who can afford something worth 1 lakh would obviously go with flagship. But if you can't, there are more budget options on the market than ever. And trust me, it'll easily last you for 2 to 3 years without any hassle. And that's pretty much it about this video. Hope you guys like it. If you did, smash that like button. And if you want to join into further tech discussions like this, feel free to subscribe. As always, talk to you in my next video.